Hello, I'm Professor Richard Toye. Welcome to another Talking Empire podcast. With me is Dr. Marc Palen, and we're going to be talking about his brand new book, The Conspiracy of Free Trade, the Anglo-American Struggle Over Empire and Economic Globalization, 1846 to 1896. Now, Marc, you're challenging some existing scholarship here. What are your main arguments?
Well, the overarching one is that it's to offer a reinterpretation of Anglo-American imperialism and economic globalization by approaching the subject from this conflict over economic ideas, this conflict between free trade and protectionism that gripped the mid to late 19th century international political economy and helped shape the course of imperial expansion. Doing that, I'd say there's probably three interventions that I'm trying to make. One is that it's to overturn this common misconception of the American political economy of the late 19th century as one of laissez-faire and free trade, and to show instead that it's quite the opposite was in place, that it was one of economic nationalism that was in place. And this is something that would shape not only American domestic development, it would also affect American foreign policy. So rather than explaining America's imperial expansion as free trade imperialism, it's better to be understood as the imperialism of economic nationalism.
Okay, so where does the conspiracy element come in?
The conspiracy plays into this, and then that it's far from being a time of laissez-faire and free trade and free markets in the late 19th century. In the United States, to advocate on behalf of those ideas and those policies were to be seen as working in cahoots with the British. The British at this time were probably the most famous free trade advocates, the Free Trade England at this time, but it was very much in many ways alone in this. And the United States was practicing infant industrial protectionism in part to protect itself from undue competition from the more advanced industries of free trade England.
And to what degree were those who advocated the free trade point of view within the United States, the ones who were accused of being in cahoots with the British, to what degree did they have real traction? Did they in fact pose a threat to the vested interests of who the protectionists were standing up for, or were they kind of fundamentally rather marginal people who were kind of attacked in a completely irrational way?
I mean, the arguments that they rely on are quite, I'd say, rational, and it's should be noted that it does seem that these protected industries in the United States, they did witness success economically, and so the idea of overturning this protectionist system for some at least, these vested interests would have seen this as a real threat to their economic way of life. But for the most part, this free trade movement is a fledgling one. They are the grassroots outsiders, mainly working in newspapers and journals, intellectual elites that were working towards free trade. Only rarely would this actually coalesce into something that was politically tangible. This happened during the two non-consecutive Cleveland administrations, the Democratic administrations of Grover Cleveland from 1885 to 89 and 1893 to 97. It was during these Cleveland administrations that my work shows that this is the moments when these free traders had a substantial amount of influence over American domestic and foreign policy and attempted, with little success in the short run at least, to turn America away from protectionism.
And the hostility that was directed towards the British, to what extent was it purely hostility towards British free trade policy? To what extent was it hostility towards the British Empire as a kind of an enterprise or an institution, given that later on we see quite powerful anti-British imperialist discourses during the 1930s and 1940s, for example?
I think there's a tendency within a lot of the Anglo-American historiography to read backwards in time the special relationship, and I think along the same lines actually of reading backwards in time American advocacy of free trade and laissez-faire, you find this in Anglo-American studies, and that we forget that throughout the 19th century, and including in the late 19th century, Anglophobia fear or hatred of the English is palpable in the United States, especially within the Republican Party, although within parts of the Democratic Party as well. Lots of Irish immigrants and so forth in the mid-19th century that bring with them a lot of anti-British sentiment as well, supports this. But yeah, if you think back, I mean, the memories of the American Revolution, the War of 1812, a variety of military and economic conflicts throughout the 19th century just exacerbated this Anglophobia. So in that sense, it's not just a fear of British free trade and goods coming into the U.S. market, competing with American goods. This taps into something that's much more deep, this Anglophobia that ran very strongly in the veins of most Americans.
Marc Palen, thank you very much.